Setting up.
Yeah, अब it is live on Facebook.
तो हो गया मेरा डन करना है उसको कनेक्टेड आ गया सेटिंग
Shall we start, sir, now?
हाँ स्टार्ट करें निखिल जी।
Yes, sir.
अब आ जाओ कोई बोले तो
एक बार सभी को म्यूट कर दें. Okay. A very good evening to everyone. I, CA Nikhil Jain, Vice Chairman, Kota Branch of CIRC of ICI, welcome you all in this second day of National Conference, Adhigam, that is being hosted by Kota Branch of CIRC of ICI. To enlighten us about the today's topic, very relevant topic, especially in the faceless regime, assessment and reassessment procedures, and its impact after Finance Act 2021, we have a very distinguished panel of experts today. First of all, I would like to welcome our branch chairman, CA Lokesh Maheshwari ji, conference director, CA Prakash Sharma ji, conference convener, CA Milind Vijay Varghese ji, conference secretary, CA Neetu Khandelwal ji, CP chairperson, CA Rajni Mittal ji. I also take the opportunity to welcome our session speaker of today's session, CA Rakesh Gupta ji, session chairman, CA Badri Vishal Maheshwari ji, our panel of experts, very experienced indeed, CA Sanjay Khandelwal ji and CA SK Bajari ji. Without wasting any time, I would like to request our branch chairman for his welcome address.
Thank you, Nikhil ji. Audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you, Nikhil ji. I welcome all the members present in the National Tax Conference Day 2, Assessment and Reassessment Procedures.
Sir, आपका म्यूट हो गया.
A special thanks to CA Milind ji to act as a convener in the National Tax Conference, and I also welcome our today's speaker, CA Rakesh Gupta ji from Delhi. And I also thankful to our session chairman, CA Badri Vishal ji Maheshwari, and our panel expert, CA Sanjeev Bajari ji and CA Sanjay Khandelwal ji. Without wasting time, I will hand over to session to you, CA Nikhil ji. Over to you, Nikhil ji.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request the convener of this national conference, CA Milind Vijay Varghese ji, for his quick address.
आज के लर्नड स्पीकर और मेरे प्रोफेशनल ब्रदर डॉक्टर राकेश गुप्ता साहब, रेस्पेक्टेड ब्रांच चेयरमैन श्री लोकेश जी माहेश्वरी, आज के सेशन चेयरमैन रेस्पेक्टेड श्री बेबी माहेश्वरी जी, सेशन पैनल एक्सपर्ट रेस्पेक्टेड संजय खंडेलवाल जी, रेस्पेक्टेड संजीव बजारी जी, मित्रों, एनटीसी अधिगम के आज दूसरे दिन के सेशन में हमारे साथ देश के जाने माने लर्नड स्पीकर डॉक्टर राकेश गुप्ता जी हैं। मैं मेरी तरफ से और कोटा ब्रांच की तरफ से उनको हार्दिक धन्यवाद देता हूं कि उन्होंने अपने अमूल्य समय में से हमें कॉन्फ्रेंस के लिए समय दिया। यहाँ पर मैं सदन को यह भी बताना चाहूँगा कि डॉक्टर राकेश गुप्ता जी बहुमुखी प्रतिभा के धनी हैं और लॉकडाउन के दौरान हाल ही में उन्होंने कुछ उच्च कोटि की कविताएं भी लिखी है। आज आप सबका आज का सत्र हम सभी के लिए फ्रूटफुल होगा, ऐसी मेरी आशा है। अंत में मैं आप सभी का इस शानदार कॉन्फ्रेंस में स्वागत करता हूं, अभिनंदन करता हूं। धन्यवाद। जय हिंद।
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, it is because of your efforts that we have been able to organize such a great national conference. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request our CP chair, C. Rajni Mittal ji, for a quick note. Rajni ji, if you are there. I don't think she is here. Okay. Today, the session chairman of this of the topic assessment reassessment procedures is our past chairman, CA Badri Vishal ji. I welcome you, sir, and I would request for a quick welcome address on your part also. Badri Vishal ji. B. Vishal ji is there, but he, I think, is unable to. Sir, can you can speak now. B. Vishal ji.
हेलो हाँ हाँ आई एम लिसनिंग
हाँ
बट
सर, आपकी आवाज आ रही है.
आ रही है
हाँ सर, आपकी आवाज आ रही है. कंटिन्यू करें सर.
द चेयरमैन ऑफ द कोटा ब्रांच Lokesh Maheshwari, organizer for today CA Nikhil Jain, CA Milind ji, Sanjeev ji Bajari, Sanjay Khande Agarwal, and today's speaker Rakesh Gupta ji. Really, today you have chosen such a good subject regarding reassessments, because there has been so many changes in the 147, 148, 148A and relevant sections. Similarly, 153A, 153C, these are also linked with these sections. So we will be benefited by Rakesh Gupta ji in detail, because the 31st March 21, the system of assessment in such cases will also shift in 147, 148. At 158, any search conducted after 11421 will not be governed by section 158A and 158C. So, and another feature which is added is 148A. In my opinion, this is a good section, that conducting inquiry before issue of notice. अब तक क्या हो रहा है कि for any information, the officer issues a notice, and without anything they are call as the written and everything, assessment proceeding is going on. Now we think that before conducting inquiry, he will not be able to issue the notice, and for this I hope Rakesh will give light on this subject. I welcome all of you, and I hand over the mic to Rakesh ji to take up the session. Right?
Thank you so much, sir. Before Rakesh sir take up the session, I would like to ask C. Siddharth Jain to give a brief introduction of our today's dynamic speaker, C. Rakesh Gupta ji from Delhi. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you so much, Nikhil Bhaiya, for this opportunity. Dr. Rakesh Gupta is an FCA, FCS, AICWA, MBA, LLB, LLM, and PhD. He was appointed as a member of ITAT at the age of 37 years, posted at Hyderabad, but resigned later on. He has also co-authored 2 books with his partner, Dr. Raj K. Agarwal, published by a leading publisher, Taxman. He is practicing as an advocate and appearing in ITAT, High Courts, and Supreme Courts. He has also participated in United Nations Committee of Experts on International Cooperation in Tax Matters, held at UN headquarters in New York in 2017 and 19, and at regional headquarters in Geneva in 2018. He is also a member of International Association of Tax Judges and participated in its meetings held at Helsinki, Finland in 2017 and Cambridge, UK in 2019. He was lately invited to address Chamber of Commerce and Industry on Finance Bill 2019 in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi. Once again, it is an honor to introduce such a learned personality. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Nikhil Jain.
Thank you, Siddharth. And we all can understand that what a great speaker we have today. So now, without wasting time, I hand over the session to CA Rakesh Gupta ji. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Siddharth, for introducing me in such lavish, charitable, and magnanimous way. Chairman and other office bearers of Kota branch, my fellow co-panelists, and a galaxy of my professional friends who are logged on to this webinar. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be with all of you, this afternoon, to speak on assessment, reassessment as impacted by the Finance Act 2021. In the past also, my very dear friend Milind had requested me, to be with all of you in Kota on several occasions. But the problem used to be there, this Kota was connected by train from Delhi, and which meant that 2 consecutive and successive nights you have to travel, you have to be in the train, and that is why I could not make it. I always used to feel, very small when Milind used to talk to me, and I used to feel very guilty. But then this Corona in a way has given this opportunity, in this sense that virtually I am connected with all of you. Friends, when the topic says that assessment and reassessment impacted by the Finance Act 2021, that means that something big has taken place. Otherwise, this Finance Act 2021 would not have found place in the caption itself. Yes, definitely wholesale changes have taken place in this regard, and therefore your branch has considered it appropriate to select this topic in this manner. We have seen by the Finance Act section 144 capital B now has come, by which the faceless scheme of assessment, which earlier used to be guided by a faceless scheme, though on the strength of section 143, 3A, 3B and 3C, now has been replaced by the section 144 capital B itself, and the entire scheme of faceless assessment, which was unveiled on 17th of February, now has been legislated in the section itself. Therefore, Finance Act 2021, position prior to it and positions thereafter, may not have undergone a substantial change, because this faceless scheme, which was unveiled on 17th of February, is more or less, is almost identical or akin to what has been legislated in section 144 capital B. But so far as the provisions relating to the assessment and reassessment, as used to be contained in erstwhile section 147, 148, 149 and 151. Now, those erstwhile provisions have been consigned into the dustbin of history. And in that place, and in lieu of those such thrown out provisions, new provisions have been enacted on the statute and have been brought on the statutory or legislative horizon. And those sections are section 147, 148, 149, 151. But then apart from that, these 4 sections, a new section, as Maheshwari sir has also pointed out, inquiry before the issue of notice under section 148 in the form of section 148 capital A now has come. And therefore, it would be pertinent, it would be appropriate also to compare the position under the new law as against the position of law which was there earlier to 1st April 2021. I am quite conscious that each one's mind is engaged by a spate of notices under section 148 which have been issued, more particularly on or after 1st April 2021 to 30th June 2021. And in fact, we all were quite apprehensive and fearful lest this date of 30th June should again be extended. But unfortunately, some sanity, some good sense seems to have prevailed, and that 30th June probably has come as the final doomsday for assessment year 2013-14 and 2014-15. So friends, this provision of 147 and 148, that is the reassessment provisions, were there right from almost at the inception of not only 1961 Act, but were there even under the 1922 Act. Under 1961 Act, these sections were 147 onwards, whereas my contemporaries and my seniors would vouch that in 1922 Act, these sections were section 34. But anyway, what I am seeking to impress upon is that the power to reopen a concluded assessment was always there, which was vested with the assessing officer. And therefore, let us understand the rationale, the justification, the philosophy behind the enactment of the provision. So the philosophy behind the enactment of these reopening provisions of the concluded assessment was that there may be situations where some income may escape assessment, may not be assessed in the assessment itself, and therefore there must be provisions which should be made under the statute so that such escaped income can be brought to tax. But at the same time, there always remained a dilemma before the legislature to the effect that why should the finality of an assessment be allowed to be disturbed? Because the law has attached greatest sanctity to the finality of an assessment, and therefore, when an assessment when an assessment attains finality, then it is the bounden duty as a result of this kind of a philosophy that the finality of an assessment is something, which is very important and which cannot be and should not be, not to be allowed to be disturbed by virtue of these provisions. And therefore, the legislature has enacted these provisions, but then has enacted these provisions by providing certain statutory safeguards. Because in the opinion, in the view, and in the considered opinion of those who are responsible for framing the law, they ensured that whenever such occasion arises that some income escapes assessment, and because of such income escaping such assessment, and therefore such escaped income needs to be brought to tax, but when it is brought to tax, Nikhil, you can kindly switch off your video, please. It disturbs me. As you have got important things to do, so do I have also important things to do. Yes. So it disturbs me. I'm meditating. Yes. So therefore, the legislature ensures that certain statutory safeguards are built into the system, so that whenever or wherever the revenue finds this is a fit case where the finality should be disturbed, then subject to those statutory safeguards, that income which has escaped assessment can be brought to tax. Therefore, if you remember that under the erstwhile provision of section 147, the legislature had used a very important expression, and that expression is missing under the new law, and that expression was reason to believe. If you remember, under the erstwhile section 147, the legislature used to write section 147 more or less in this manner, that if an assessing officer has reason to believe that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment for any year. Now that reason to believe term, that phrase, may appear to be very brief phrase, may appear to be very innocuous phrase, but then the importance with which this phrase came to be used is evident, that the legislature has used the similar and identical expressions even in the most draconian provisions of search. The most draconian provision, that is the search provision, is there under section 132. So you can very well imagine, you can very well appreciate that a provision as serious as that of search under section 132, consists the same phrase reason to believe, now which used to be possessed by the erstwhile section 147. But then the legislature in its wisdom considered to do away with that phrase, and it is no longer there. and it has been replaced or substituted a much wilder expressions, and that expressions now which has come to be used under the new reopening of the assessment provisions is information that suggests that income chargeable to tax is escaped assessment. So instead of reason to believe, information suggesting escapement of income has come to be used. So friends, now we will read section 147 and all these sections, and then we will see as to what is there in store for discussion, because the topic which has been kept and which Milind ji is very passionately told me that the topic which has been kept is assessment or reassessment as impacted by the Finance Act 2021. I must salute a Kota branch and Brother Milind for having selected this topic for today's discussion. So now the section says 147, on or after 1st April 2021, if any income chargeable to tax in the case of
I request everyone, please अपने अपने mics को mute पे रख दें, because it keeps disturbing the speaker, sir. So I request everyone to please put on mute.
Yes. So if an income chargeable to tax in the case of an SSE has escaped assessment for any assessment year. Now these terminologies were there under the SY section 147 also. That if an assessing officer has reason to believe that income chargeable to tax in case of an SSE for any assessment year has escaped assessment. So all those three ingredients which were there under the SY sections are still persisting and continuing. So then what would happen if there is such income which has escaped assessment in case of an SSE for any assessment year has escaped assessment, then the assessing officer may bring to tax such income, may bring to tax such escaped income based upon the statutory safeguards which are there under section 148 to section 153. So there has to be income. Not only has there to be the income, but the income must be the income which must be chargeable to tax. So there should not only be income, and income should not only be chargeable to tax, but then such income which was chargeable to tax must have escaped assessment. So it is not income simpliciter, now which can be, but then income must be chargeable to tax. Therefore, to be taken by an assessing officer before invoking the provision section 147 that there is income, that income is not an income simpliciter, but that income is chargeable to tax, and such chargeable income now has evaded tax or has escaped assessment, and only then by observing the statutory safeguards as contained as contained in section 148 to 153, that assessing officer can assess or reassess such escaped income. So earlier section 147 was somewhat longer. That was longer for the reason that there was one more power which was given to the assessing officer, though that power is still there, but then that power has been taken out from the main section and it has been put under the explanation to section 147, but with some changes, and those changes seem to be well thought out changes, and therefore let us see as to what were the provisions or additional power which were there under the erstwhile section 147. So under the erstwhile section 147, the additional power with the assessing officer was that he could have brought to tax any other escaped income also, if that escaped income came to his notice during the course of reassessment proceeding. Then also he could have brought to tax such escaped income also to tax. Now that phrase was creating a problem in view of Now your own Rajasthan High Court's decision in the case of Sri Ram Singh. In Delhi, and we have got Ranbaxy. In Bombay, we have got Jet Airways. Though Karnataka, was against it. There were one more High Court which did not agree with this proposition. And I remember even in one of the matters which I argued with the Delhi High Court, I'm forgetting its name. The Delhi High Court, despite the precedents being available in the form of Ranbaxy, my Lord Justice Bhatt, as he then was, as the presiding judge in Delhi High Court, now referred the matter before the larger bench, the full bench of the Delhi High Court. But then, because of the tax effect, the departmental appeal was dismissed later on, and therefore, no final verdict came, from the full bench of the Delhi High Court. But be that as it may, I am on a point that earlier the assessing officer could have brought to tax even any other escaped income also. Now, which has escaped assessment and which comes to the notice of the assessing officer during the course of subsequent reassessment proceeding. Now, those decisions which I referred, Sri Ram Singh in Rajasthan High Court, because you all are from Kota, governed by or governed within the jurisdiction of Rajasthan High Court. That decision or similarly placed decisions decide that since the legislature has given this power to the assessing officer to bring to tax any other escaped income by using the expressions also, and therefore the legislature has always visualized that this power, this additional power, can be exercised by the assessing officer only if the addition comes to be made in respect of the main issue for which the case was reopened. And therefore, the legislature now, under the new provision, now has removed that kind of a power from the main section, and now it has sought to explain it by way of explanation under the new section to say that for the purpose of assessment, reassessment or recomputation of this section, the assessing officer may assess or reassess the income in respect of any issue. In respect of any issue, now which is escaped assessment, and such issue comes to his notice subsequently during the course of reassessment proceeding, whether the process of section 148 capital A has been done in respect of such issue or not. Now this word is such issue or in respect of any issue. Now this is also a very well considered and thought out change, and there seems to be some purpose, and that purpose is, if you remember, Bombay High Court in Metro Auto Corporations in 286 ITR now laid down a very all-embracing proposition, and with utmost humility and respect to the Lordship Bombay High Court, now I can say that perhaps that could never have been the intention of the legislature, and the Bombay High Court said in that decision that if an assessment of a particular year is in appeal on any issue, then that year's reassessment cannot be done. Now, in order to dilute the impact and effect of the decision, third proviso to section 147 under the old provisions was added. And the third provision used the expression that the assessing officer may assess or reassess such income other than the income involving matters which are the subject matter of any appeal. So, if any income involving matter which was the subject matter of any appeal, then third proviso to the erstwhile section 147 provided that such matter or such income involving matter which is subject matter of an appeal, now on that reopening cannot be done. Now that was also creating a problem. And what was the problem? The problem was, my fellow co-panelists, would vouch that, for example, let me take one example. Suppose there was some addition on some point involving, say, section 80 IC, because every section has got several matters or several facets, several aspects. Now, assessing officer in the original assessment proceeding found that this undertaking is not, say, situated in the area in which it ought to have been located before it could have availed the benefit of Section 80 IC. Now you are contesting this issue before the appellate authority. Now, because of the restrictions placed by the third proviso to Section 147, then any other matter involving Section 80 IC probably could not have been gone into for the purpose of reopening of an assessment. And that is why they have further thrashed out, that income involving matters into any issue. So, under explanation to Section 147 now, if there is any issue which is escaped assessment, though it is also capable of being debated, it is also capable of being interpreted in more than one way, and therefore, some overzealous, overindulgent, over-enthusiastic lawyer and chartered accountant even can dare to argue, sir, the moment there is any issue which is pending in appeal, and therefore, any facet of that issue cannot be reopened. But then the legislature on its own front has taken adequate precautions to further fine-tune that language of erstwhile third proviso by saying that assessing officer can bring to tax any other income in respect of any issue which has escaped assessment. So I think by taking out this kind of a power from the main section of 147, and then by further fine-tuning the expressions, any issue, the legislature probably has sought to kill two birds with one stone, and that seems to be the purport and object of putting this kind of an additional power with the assessing officer under explanations. So the effect of this explanation is that whether or not the addition in respect of that main issue for which the case was reopened is made or not, but then if while scrutinizing or while seized with that kind of an issue, if an assessing officer comes across with any other issue which has escaped assessment, then this addition can still be made, and therefore the import of all those decisions, including Rajasthan High Court in Sri Ram Singh, probably sought to be done away with by the legislature by virtue of this amendment. So now that reason to believe which was there under Section 147, now it has been taken away completely from the ambit of Section 147. Now it is sought to be expressed in a different manner, but not in Section 147, but in Section 148, and then we will see as to what is that. So Section 148 first proviso says that no notice under this section shall be issued by the assessing officer for any assessment year unless the assessing officer is in possession of information that suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. So unless the assessing officer is in possession of the information that suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. So that objectivity, which was earlier ensured by the phrase reason to believe in Section 147, is sought to be given by virtue of these expressions which have been used under the proviso to Section 148. If you remember those reason to believe, now Sanjeev Bajri sir is there, B.V. Maheshwari sir is there, my other senior members, my senior friends are there, they would vouch that reason to believe though used to be very innocuous kind of expressions, but then the courts had given a very deep-rooted meaning to it. Courts had said that unless an assessing officer is having material in his possession, he cannot be said to be having reason to believe. And not only this, the court said that material must not be the material simpliciter. That material must be having nexus with the belief of escapement of income. And court did not stop at this stage. Court further said that there must not only be material, that material must not only be having the nexus with the belief, but then this nexus must be the live nexus with the belief of escapement of income. So the legislature said that there has to be direct correlation, or there has to be the direct, proximate, inextricable connection between the cause and the effect. And therefore the courts have said, while interpreting reason to believe right from Calcutta Discount Company in 41 ITR 191, that if there is no live nexus with the belief of escapement of income, and that live nexus now will be indicated by this thing, that that nexus is not far-fetched, is not remote, is not distant, is not based on gossip, it's not based on rumor, it's not based on hunch, it's not based on surmise, it's not based on conjectures, it's not based on suspicion. So now you kindly imagine that the legislature, as Bhai Milind said while introducing me, my of late found passion for Hindi poetry. Yes, though I mean that passion was there when I used to study in schools, but then because of over involvement and engagement in the profession, probably that went deep buried, I mean somewhere. And this corona, I mean, had given you, because then you have not to appear before the courts. And today only, after your, I mean, this is over, Milind bhai, I am going to launch my YouTube channel. Though my firm's YouTube channel is there, I mean, which consists my all my lectures in RRA YouTube channel. But then after this, I'm going to launch my own channel, and which I'm dedicated to my wife, and without whose this thing, I mean, it could not have been possible for me. Anyway, so reason to believe used to control the power of assessing office. As I said at the beginning, that there were statutory safeguards kept by the legislature. And why? Because the law has attached greatest sanctity to the finality of an assessment. And therefore, the legislature was duty bound to ensure that whenever any finality of a concluded assessment is sought to be disturbed, then there must be some statutory checks and balance. And that check and balance, like a Chaukidar, I mean, was made in the section 147 in the very first sentence itself, reason to believe. I'm not saying that the Chaukidar has gone under the new provision, I'm not saying, but then that Chaukidar probably may have been diluted to a certain extent. Now, whether that is good or that is not good, to which we will come later on, but reason to believe, which used to check or which used to act as a check and balance. Why? Because any overindulgent assessing officer should not act in haste, should not act in an arbitrary manner, and should not reopen a concluded assessment merely because he feels like reopening it. So that reason to believe now has given way under the new provision in terms of the expressions that there must be information with the assessing officer which suggests that income chargeable to tax is escaped assessment. And earlier reason to believe was given meaning by the courts. Here, it is the legislature which has sought to give meaning to this expression, that information that suggests income chargeable to tax as escaped assessment. How? By enacting two situations under explanation 1 to section 148. That an assessing officer, because earlier legislature could not define as to when can it be said that the assessing officer would have had reason to believe. But now the legislature has to objectively try to lay down as to when can it be said that the assessing officer has got information in his possession which suggests that income chargeable to tax as escaped assessment. And that exhaustive situation number 1 is when there is information flagged by the board in case of this SSE for this assessment year based upon the risk management strategy. I mean, though the words used, are very heavy. Risk management strategy made by the board, information flagged. But then, so far, nothing is in public domain. Maybe it may be kept close to the chest by the board. The board, based on some objective criteria, may flag that this information is flagged in case of this SSE for this assessment year, and therefore, based upon this information so flagged, the case of this SSE for this assessment year is liable to be reopened. And that information which may be flagged may be that if an SSE, if a person has deposited more than a basic threshold limit in cash, say for example, I'm not aware as to what is the risk management strategy, but then that risk management strategy which may be formulated by the board obviously have to be based on some objective criteria. But then, since that is not in the public domain, at least I am not aware. But then I believe that that risk management strategy will be based on some objective criteria, and those objective criteria will be formulated by the board that if this kind of a thing happens, then there is a strong possibility of evasion of tax. Like for one example I give. Now, if from a bank account, checks are deposited, cash is withdrawn. Now, that will be a case, I'm not saying for sure, but then that will be a case where the possibility of some kind of some misadventure is there. So therefore, board, if having analyzed a series of transactions in this manner, based upon the inputs coming from the field, now lays down some objective criteria that if this is the situation, then it will be information flagged. And if such information is flagged in case of say Mr. X for assessment year, say 2021-22, then this will be a case where there is information that suggests escapement of income. So as all of us know, several information reports are given by various regulatory agencies. Based upon that, some risk management strategy will be formulated, and then that risk management strategy at least would be made available to the departmental authorities, more particularly to the commissionerate, and then based upon which the reopening of the assessment will be done. And the second is, and which is much more wider in its scope, is that when there is a final objection raised by CAG, what is the final objection? That assessment in the case of this SSE for this assessment year has not been done in accordance with law. It is much more wider than merely a case where the income has escaped assessment, because an assessment cannot be said to be framed in accordance with law on several counts. Escapement of income may be one count, but there may be several situations on account of which it can be said that this assessment has not been done in accordance with law. Suppose some income, though may have been assessed, but then the tax rate which ought to have been applied has not been applied. Then also it can be said that the assessment has not been made in accordance with law. So, like if you know, as all of us know, that if an income is assessed, say under section 68, 69, 69 ABC, then the tax rate is provided under section 115 BBE. Or for that matter, if there is suppose some short-term capital gain which ought to have suffered the tax at the rate 30%, but then the tax rate which was applied, say 20%, for whatever reasons, there can be n number of reasons. We need not. So I am on the concept that this exhaustive category of information suggesting escapement of income, where there is a final objection of CAG, is much wider as compared to the first mentioned exhaustive category of information flag. That income has not been assessed in accordance with the provisions of Act. So there may well be a situation that income may not have escaped assessment in case of this SSC for this assessment year. Suppose a wife's assessment now has been made assessing some income. There is no guidance available. Therefore, I am interpreting these provisions of the first principles of law. And the first principle of law is the rule of literal construction. The rule of literal construction says that you have to read the law as it stands. And therefore, when this exhaustive category of information says that the final objection of the CAG can be that the assessment has not been made in accordance with law, then can cover even this situation where, say, a wife's some income was offered in the wife's hand, whereas that income did not belong to her. Therefore, income has not escaped assessment in her hand, but this income, say in this example, belonged to the husband. So if the CAG puts a note, final objection, that the assessment in the case of the wife has not been made in accordance with law, even if the tax has come to be levied in the hands of wife, but then it will be a case which is capable of being reopened under the amended provision, even if the income has not escaped assessment, on this premise and on this ground that the assessment of the wife in this example has not been made in accordance with law. So this is the real import, because of which the meaning of this information suggesting escapement of income has been given a very wide coverage. So reason to believe, the department always used to struggle before the courts. SSCs used to say that assessing officer did not have the material. If at all he was having material, it was not having nexus, much less the live nexus. Then the department used to know, no sir, we were having this material. This was having live nexus. But now this is a codified, well-defined, exhaustive situations. The departmental authorities now will have to show, sir, here is the final objection CAG, now which says that assessment has not been made in accordance with law. And therefore, you appellate authority or the writ authority or writ court, now you kindly examine it. Or, sir, kindly see, this is the information which has been flagged based upon the risk management strategy made by the board. And therefore, our reopening is based upon these two kinds of information. So whether this is good or bad, it is good for department, it is good for the SSC, it is bad for the department, it is bad for the SSC. And therefore, one cannot say finally, but then it is also good in the sense that SSC also, would be able to know as to what has led or what has prompted the assessing officer to reopen the concluded assessment with much more precision and certainty. So this is then explanation 2 to section 148. That gives a very, very interesting assumption. Now it says that if you are an SSC who has been searched on or after 1st April 2021, as Maheshwari sir also said in the beginning, that on or after 1st April 2021, searches taking place, then earlier provision section 153A, 153B, 153C and 153D would no longer be available to the assessing officer. Now all those assessments or reassessments now would be done under the new provisions of assessment under section 148. And in fact, I tell you, when me and my partner Dr. Raj Agrawal, when we were revising our book on search 7th edition, then came this amendment, and therefore we had to devote considerable time in rewriting the new assessment provisions. And when we both went deeper into these new provisions, then we discovered, and I'll come to all those aspects, that still despite these new provisions, those slippery fields are still there. They will catch the SSC from the back, and they will catch the department also from the back. And as we proceed, as I proceed further, then probably I would be able to unfold them. So explanation 2 to section 148 under the new provision says that if you are a person who has been searched on or after 1st April 2021, or who has been surveyed on or after 1st April 2021, but then of course those survey should not be survey under section 133A subsection 5, or should not be under subsection 2 capital A. That's for verification of TDS TCA. So if you are a person who has been surveyed on or after 1st April 2021, or if you are a person whose money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing belonging to you, or any books of accounts or documents pertaining to you, or any informations contained in such books of accounts, documents which relate to you on or after 1st April 2021, then for these 4 kind of persons, it will be assumed, it will be deemed for preceding 3 years. Now you kindly see the height of deeming fictions by the legislature. So for these 4 category of persons, if you are a searched or requisition, number 2, if you are a person surveyed, if you are a person though may not have been searched, but then somebody else has been searched, and your money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article, things, books of accounts, document belonging to you, pertaining to you, relating to you have been found, then in your cases, whether there is any information actually found or not, for preceding 3 years, now it will be deemed that the assessing officer has information that suggests that income has escaped assessment. Height of fiction. So if those who are responsible for making our income tax law, if they are allowed to write the fictional stories, then I think there cannot be better author and then them to write fictions. So earlier, if you remember, that in case of a person searched, in case of a person requisition, in case of a 153C kind of a person, preceding 6 years assessment used to be reopened. But then various high courts gave this meaning that if it is case of an unabated assessment, then the addition can be made only if there is incriminating material found during the course of search. So the impact of those mandatory 6 years assessments were completely diluted by those decisions. Though again on this issue there were divergent views, and if you ask me as an author, I and my partner Dr. Raj had taken a very well thought out, considered view that, with utmost respect, though as a lawyer, because when I argue, I rely upon and rest upon my case on all those decisions. But as an author, if you ask me, with utmost respect and humility, all those decisions probably may not be laying down the correct law. Anyway, so now under the new amended provision section 148, these 3 or 4 kinds of persons, now it will be deemed that there is information that suggests escaped income for preceding 3 years. So if the search has taken place, say on today, say on 4th or 3rd of July 2021, then March 21, March 20, and March 19. Now these 3 preceding previous years, it will be deemed that the assessing officer of this searched person, or this surveyed person, or this other person now is having information that suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, whether in fact any incriminating material is not found, may not be found. So this is the, but then of course the legislature in its wisdom now has created this fiction. और फिर हम इसी फिक्शन पर क्यों आश्चर्यचकित होते हैं? फिक्शन तो 222E का है, 222E, कि if a closely held company has given a loan to a shareholder having more than 10% shareholding and is having accumulated profits, then such loan or advance to the extent of accumulated profits will be deemed to be the dividend. will be treated as dividend. Fiction की height तो यहाँ है. Fiction तो section 224(10) में दिया है कि if you deduct any employees provident fund or employees contributions or ESI from your workmen's wages and salaries, that will constitute your income. Fiction की height तो यहाँ है. ये तो बेचारा हल्का फुल्का सा फिक्शन है. चलो भाई, अभी तो असेसमेंट होगा, देखते हैं कैसे असेसमेंट कर. वहां तो इनकम ही मान ली गई है. यहाँ तो ये है कि there is information suggesting escapement of income. So fictions, our income tax act and is full of fictions. हर शाख पे बैठा है, अंजाम गुलिस्ता क्या होगा. So fictions. Rather, I would advise मिलिंद जी, एक दिन आप इस पर परिचर्चा रखें कि हमारे इस आयकर विधान में कितने सारे फिक्शंस हैं और उन फिक्शंस की जो विधाएं हैं, जो उनकी जो एरिया ऑफ ऑपरेशंस हैं, वो कितने विस्तृत हैं, इसके ऊपर आप चर्चा करें. हाँ, एनीवे, सो अब हम चलते हैं कि उस असेसिंग ऑफिसर को ऐसी अवस्था में क्या करना होगा. उन्होंने कहा आप स्टेट में यू कैन नॉट इश्यू नोटिस अंडर सेक्शन 148. जैसा कि माहेश्वरी साहब ने अपने ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स में कहा कि अब सेक्शन 148 ए आ गया है. 148 हालांकि आता वो 148 के बाद है, लेकिन वो करना 148 से पहले होगा. 148 के बाद 148 ए आता है, लेकिन वो करना 148 से पहले पड़ेगा. तो इसलिए हमको पढ़ना भी 148 से पहले 148 पड़ेगा. 148A says that no notice under this section shall be issued unless the assessing officer does these things. And you know, now all these things which an assessing officer is required to do under 148 capital A are mandatory. And as I said in the beginning, power to disturb the finality of a concluded assessment is a serious power. And therefore, if any statutory safeguard built by the legislature is not followed by the assessing officer, then it will hit at the bottom. And therefore, if any of these statutory safeguards which is made under section 148 capital A is not followed by the assessing officer, then the consequence, the result is inevitable. And that is what? That reassessment now will fall under its own weight. This is for the reason that section 148 capital A has used the expression shall. Though I'm conscious that merely because the legislature uses the expression shall doesn't mean that it is mandatory. But then the overall scheme of 148 capital A, in the backdrop of the philosophy of disturbing the finality of an assessment, coupled with the user of expression shall. Now, all these things cumulatively indicate that the requirement or the requisites of section 148 capital A are mandatory. So what is the first mandatory condition? That assessing officer shall conduct an inquiry. So earlier, under the old law, what used to happen? Assessing officer got some information. He kept close to his chest. He recorded the reason. SSE gets notice under section 148, and then SSE keeps on speculating. What can be the reason? I disclosed everything. I had been assessed. That too under section 143(3). More than a period of 4 years has gone. So what kind of information now has come into possession of an assessing officer, now which says that he had reason to believe that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment? We used to gesticulate. We used to keep on guessing. Now, assessing officer shall conduct an inquiry, and that inquiry will be with respect to the information which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. So, if suppose some information which has been flagged, कि SSE has deposited this much of cash in his bank account, Now that would not ipso facto lead to the reopening of an assessment. Assessing officer is duty bound to consider an inquiry with reference to this information. But then this inquiry can be conducted by him after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority. जैसे मैं इसको कहता हूं हमेशा, जैसे कोई साइकिल चलाने वाला है या मोटरसाइकिल चलाने वाला है, एक सड़क है और उस सड़क पे वो कीलें ठोक लेता है और वो कहेगा मैं उसके बाद चलाऊंगा, तो ये 148A जो है प्रोविजन, ये उस सड़क की तरह है जिसपे कीलें निकाल ली है लेजिस्लेचर ने और उस पर असेसिंग ऑफिसर की साइकिल चलेगी रीओपनिंग की। एंड अब इसको चलाने में कितनी कुशलता, दक्षता की आवश्यकता होगी, आप इसी से अंदाज लगा सकते हैं कि उसका टायर जैसे ही किसी भी नेल के ऊपर लगा तो वो भ्रष्ट होगी। सो असेसिंग ऑफिसर शैल कंडक्ट इंक्वायरी with the prior approval of the specified authority, not only prior approval of any authority. He must, and not only the approval, it must be prior approval, not of any authority, but then that authority must be specified authority. So assessing officer shall conduct inquiry with respect to this information, which suggests that income schedule tax has escaped assessment after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority. Second, that such assessing officer shall provide an opportunity of being heard. This is very good. Earlier तो क्या होता था, वहां तो बाद में मिला करती थी, यहाँ एसएससी तक आ जाएगा, भाई देखो मेरे पास ये इंफॉर्मेशन है, मेरे पास ये एक इंगित करने वाली सूचना मुझे अपने केंद्रीय प्रत्यक्ष कर बोर्ड से आई है, अब बताइए आपको क्या कहना है। एसएससी विल नॉट बी टेकन बाय सरप्राइज. It is not a search where element of surprise has to be there. So assessing officer shall provide an opportunity, but then after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority. ये दूसरी कील है, this is the second nail. Opportunity will have to be provided. So assessing officer will have to go time and again to the specified authority. And when the department, my seniors, Sanjeev sir would vouch, Maheshwari sir would vouch. I mean, when the department approaches to the higher authorities, then there is a decorum, official decorum through proper channel. It is not that an income tax officer can approach to the chief commissioner. He doesn't have either the guts, audacity, courage, and the official decorum also. He's expected to go through the proper channel. So he is required to give opportunity to the SSE with respect to this information and ask for the comments of the SSE beforehand, but then he will have to obtain the prior approval. And then for this opportunity, he will have to grant him 7 days time minimum. Maximum time can be 1 month, 30 days. But then if an SSE says, no, he needs more time, then the assessing officer in his judicial discretion can also grant him the larger time. The third, then he shall consider the reply of the SSE furnished. Now, again, SSE would say, sir, I gave this much of reply. It was a bounden duty of an assessing officer to consider my reply, but then he has not considered my reply. Now, whether he has considered your reply, to what extent he has considered your reply, I mean, with what amount of objectivity he has considered your replies, I mean, is all. But then he should consider. So if an assessing officer writes in his order that he has considered the reply, that is all. Whether his considerations was correct or not, that appellate authority or the writ court would see. So he shall consider the reply of the SSE furnished in response to such notice. And D. Fortunately, it is not mentioned, fortunately, unfortunately, he shall consider my reply after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority. I mean, it is not there. It is not there. Now, clause D says that assessing officer shall decide on the basis of his inquiry, on the basis of the reply received in response to that inquiry, or on the basis of the reply given by the SSE. Now, whether it is a fit case where notice under section 148 is required to be issued, But again, after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority. Another nail in that road. प्रेम को पंथ कराल महा तलवार की धार पे धावनो है, ये कहा है ना, ये जो प्रेम का पंथ है, जो प्रेम का रास्ता है, ये उस तरह से है जैसे तलवार पर दौड़ना हो। तो असेसिंग ऑफिसर के लिए भी जो 148A नाम का जो प्रावधान आयकर अधिनियम और आयकर विधान में जो बता दिया गया है, ये उस तलवार की धार पे धावनों के समान है। सो he will have to decide whether it is a fit case for issue of notice under section 148 after obtaining the prior approval from the specified authority. And there is a time limit. I need not to go on that aspect, I mean, with that much of fineness. So he shall decide within a particular time frame. Before the end of the month in which the time was given to him. Or if he has not given reply, then before the end of the month in which the date falls by which he was allowed the time. Now, I wonder that with these many nails oozing out from that road, now the bicycle of the tax officer, now, I mean, lest should not be punctured. Now my seniors, my contemporaries would vouch that earlier under the old provision, there used to be one approval under section 151. Or rather, it was so provided, yes, under section 151. And under section 149, that on the reasons recorded by the assessing officer, unless these authorities were satisfied. 151. And those authorities used to write, I am satisfied. Yes, it is a fit case. And then the assessees would rush to the court, appellate authorities or before the rate court. Sir, what kind of the satisfaction is this? Now, if the legislature has made a provision that notice under section 148 shall not be issued unless these authorities were satisfied on the reasons recorded by the assessing officer, that it is a fit case for the issue of notice under section 148, then the least which is expected from such competent authorities before they grant their approval, at least they should write something. Because unless the mind of a public officer is brought on record, then till then it doesn't transpire, it doesn't inspire confidence. And when each action or inaction of a public officer is subject to judicial review before the higher appellate court, then how would the higher appellate court then decide that the satisfaction arrived at by such competent authority that it is a fit case for issue of notice under
कैसे बंद हो गया?
क्या हुआ?
राकेश जी का शायद, सर राकेश जी शायद वीडियो तो नहीं दिख रहा, बट ही अभी अवेलेबल है ऑनलाइन. राकेश सर, कैन यू हियर अस?
वहीं से हुआ है बस.
फोन लगाओ, फोन.
सम नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम.
अच्छा फ्लो चल रहा था यार.
निखिल क्या हुआ?
सर वो नेटवर्क अवेलेबल तो दिख रहे हैं, बट मैं कॉल कर रहा हूँ.
The person you're calling is not answering. Please try later. आप जिस व्यक्ति को कॉल कर रही हैं, वो उत्तर
फोन भी नहीं मिल रहा.
और
राकेश सर,
सर वो ऑनलाइन तो है बट वी कांट, आई थिंक ही कांट हियर अस.
नेट की प्रॉब्लम आ रही थी।
हेलो, हाँ सर.
ये नेटवर्क का इश्यू है।
इसलिए अभी जस्ट मेरी बात हुई सर से, वहां
आगे,
पर
आगे।
कुछ
आ गया
आया
यस सर.
क्या हुआ?
ठीक है।
एक मिनट. राकेश सर आपको अनम्यूट कर दिया है.
I am coming. There is some technical.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. You are welcome again.
I am coming because my well-oiled internet connection is not visible. So please bear with me.
Sir,
Okay.
you are audible. You are completely
There
audible.
is
Sir,
some
right now.
problem. It's very unfortunate. What?
Sir, you are audible.
I may be audible, but then this connection which is coming is very okay. चलिए सर, मैं let me शुरू करता हूँ मैं. So we used to argue that there was no application. Competent authority is quite mechanical, and courts also used to say that the approval given by the competent authority appears to be bereft of application of mind. Now, under the new provisions, as many as 5 approvals at different stages now whether would prove last nail in the coffin. Let us keep our fingers crossed to see as to whether this would happen or not. Anyway, so now this process of inquiry under 148A now is not applicable in case of a person search, but of course in case of survey, now 148A process of inquiry now will have to be undergone. So under the new provisions, the assessing officer is required to pass an order under section 140. Now will accompany the notice under section 148. Now this is a very important thing, that when SSC is notice along with an order, that order A, after eliciting the reply of the SSC on that information which suggested escapement of income, and then when that notice is served, then the SSC is required to file return of income. And this requirement of filing of return, I have always been at loss to understand the rationale of asking an SSC to file a fresh return of income when there is no concession available because of the fresh filing of return. I could have understood had there been some concession in the form that whatever income SSC would disclose in this new return, now there will not be any adverse consequence qua that amount except the tax or interest. But then rather, if an income is shown in the return so filed, then it is a case of an admitted underreported income or misreported income, or when section 270 sealment. Therefore, the SSCs most of the times mechanically file the same return, or even if they do not file the same return, they say that the return filed by us on such and such day now may be considered a fresh return in response to the notice under section 148. And then section 148 says that all provisions of the Act. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Please let me know, am I audible?
You are audible, sir.
Yes, sir.
Because the light,
So you
because
may
the light is
you may put off your video to get the better network.
So
There is some problem.
Hello, Rakesh sir.
okay, now probably the light has come, and the situation should be.
Sir, आप video off
Yes.
कर दीजिए.
So
And you can continue with the audio.
Video कैसे? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes. ये light आ गई है. So these are the provisions 148, 148A. Now a very important thing, I mean, which is there. Now time limit for the notices under section 149. Now 149, if you remember, under the old law, there used to be 3 time limits: 4 years, 6 years, and 16 years. 16 years time limit was in respect of the foreign assets, and that 16 years time limit was brought by Finance Act 2012. But now there is Black Money, Undisclosed Foreign Income and Assets, and Impositions of Tax Act 2015, and therefore that time limit probably has become redundant, because under that act, that is also again a very another classic piece of the draconian law. Me a new book on the black money law, and I tell you, जिस एक्ट का नाम याद करने में इतना कष्ट हो, Black Money, Undisclosed Foreign Income and Assets, and Imposition of Tax Act 2015. So you can very well understand, and the way that act has been made, I mean, that speaks volume of the absence of what should I use expressions, the mind by the legislature. Anyway, that is beside the point. So 16 years is gone. Now instead of 4 to 6 years, now this has been made 3 and 10 years. So for the 3 years, there is no likely escaped incomes amount. If there is amount of income which has escaped assessment, then preceding 3 years assessment can be reopened. And in case of search, in case of survey, or in case of that other kind of a person whose money, bullion, jewelry, books of accounts, documents have been found in search, now 3 preceding assessment years, it will be deemed that there is information which suggests that income chargeable tax has escaped assessment. But then for reopening a case beyond 3 years, up to 10 years from the end of the relevant assessment year, there are twin requirements. And these twin requirements, which I'm going to narrate, are very important. And I would urge each one of you to kindly listen me very carefully. Because when we analyze the section 149 for this book of Search and Seizure published by Taxman, then we found that again, another what should I say, trench which the legislature has dug for their exercise of reopening in most of the cases is infructuous. Is section 149 subsection 1 clause B, which says that a case can be reopened beyond 3 years from the end of the relevant assessment years, up to 10 years from the end of the relevant assessment year, if the amount of income that has escaped assessment or is likely to have escaped assessment is rupees 50 lakhs or more. So I can understand not want to waste its time, energy and efforts for the smaller cases of escaped income. So if the amount of escaped income or the likely escaped income is rupees 50 lakhs or more, then it can be reopened even if it is beyond 3 years. But of course, it has to be within 10 years from the end of the relevant assessment year. Second is that the assessing officer must be in possession of books of accounts, documents or evidence to show that income chargeable to tax is represented in the form of asset. Now this thing, that amount of escaped income or likely escaped income must be represented by asset. What does it mean? So if there is escapement of income, say of 100 crores, but then it is not represented by asset, then can that case not be reopened? Can that can that ever be the approach of the legislation? But then the way this provision has been couched, worded, and drafted is this, that if the amount of escaped income is represented in the form of asset, only then the case can be opened. An asset that has also been defined, though, in deposits, shares and securities, loans and advances. And the hardcore asset like cash now is not there. So, but then what does it mean that the escaped income must be represented by asset in the form, or must be represented in the form of asset? And at which point of time? Whether it must be represented in the form of asset in the year to which that income belongs, or now. And if escaped income is not represented in the form of asset,
So voice is breaking.
can an assessment be got?
Excuse me, sir. Sir, voice is coming on and off. आपकी voice break हो रही है.
Okay. Now
Yeah,
it's all right.
Yes, sir.
Now it's all right.
Yes, sir.
Now it's all right. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So represented by asset. Now I always ask a question. Now, if some tax, duty or cess, suppose, has not been paid, and a period of 3 years has gone, and that tax, duty or cess which has not been paid was liable to be disallowed, say under section 43B, or some expenditure, I mean, for which or on which tax ought to have been deducted has not been deducted, and it has gone unnoticed for 3 years. Now that cannot be brought to tax, because that disalliance or that additional income or disalliance in the form of additional cannot be said to be represented by asset. Suppose if you have sold some immovable property, say for ₹10 crores of rupees, whereas its stamp duty value was say 14 crores of rupees. Now this additional 4 crores rupees, though you are liable to pay tax, and since you have not paid tax with reference to this 4 crores of rupees, and therefore your likely escaped income is more than 50 lakhs, but then this additional 4 crore cannot be said to be represented by asset. Can there be such kind of an intention or magnanimity of heart on the part of the framers of law? I mean, I wonder. So it seems to be a legislative lapse, or if I put it like this in the terminology of games, this is a self goal made by the legislature against itself. But anyway, I mean, this is good. So beyond 3 years, escaped income or likely escaped income must be more than 50 lakhs of rupees. There must be books of accounts or documents and evidence in respect of it, and such escaped income or likely escaped income must be represented in the form of asset. And unless all these 3 conditions are fulfilled, because as I said in the beginning, power to disturb the finality of an assessment is coupled with the statutory safeguards, statutory limitations on the powers of the assessing officer. And therefore, the powers of the assessing officer in this regard are in the form of various these situations. Then comes section 151. 151, specified authorities, because you remember in 148 capital A, or even under section 148, that notice cannot be issued unless there is a prior approval of the specified authority. So those authorities are prescribed in section 151. Though the legislature has tried to make these provisions stringent from the point of view of the tax authorities by making such kind of a provision in the form of section 148A, and by prescribing and providing to obtain prior approval from the specified authorities. But then let us see, I mean, whether this intention of the legislature is implemented in spirit or not. Of course, it will be implemented in letter, because if it is found not to have been implemented in letter, then the courts would quash it. So who are the specified authorities? So if the assessment year involved is 3 years or less than 3 years from the end of the relevant assessment year, then the principal commissioner, principal director, director. But then if the period is relating to an assessment year which is more than 3 years old, then principal chief commissioner, principal director general, chief commissioner, director general. Such authorities are the prescribed authorities. So these are the provisions of assessment and reassessment impacted by the Finance Act 2021. And now let us see several practical situations which we all are witnessing. First of all, lots of hue and cry was made in all circles, and our circle is not an exception to it. Now, whether assessment year 2013-14, now which had become barred on or before 31st March 2020, now whether the notice under section 148 could have been issued for that assessment year. Then thereafter came that assessment year 14-15, now whose time limit expired on 31st March 2021. But then those notices were issued on or after 1st April 2021, whether they could be issued or not. So the legislature, if you remember, because of this pandemic, promulgated an ordinance in 2020 on 31st March, by which it assumed power to relax the rigor of certain provisions of the Act for the completion of certain actions. And under the provisions of ordinance, the power was taken to issue notification. Now this ordinance then became an act in September, and that name of that act was Taxation and Relaxation of Other Provisions Amendment Act 2020. And same provisions which were there in ordinance, they were incorporated in the act itself. And under that act also, under section 3 subsection 1 of that act, a power was taken by the legislature to issue notification for several things, and one of the thing was for the completion of certain actions. For the completion of certain actions. And on the strength of this power, the board issued notification dated 31st March 2021. Later on, 27th April 2021, extending the time limits of those actions which were expiring on 31st March till 30th June 2021. We cannot say that this power of issuing notice for assessment year 2013-14 and 14-15 on or before 30th June or beyond 1st April was not within the legislative competence. We could not have said this. So these notices which were issued were perfectly within the legislative competence, number one. But from 1st April 2021, the old provisions now have gone deep into the Arabian Ocean, and new provisions have come. And therefore the question comes, I am going to articulate one very important thing, and therefore I'd urge my professional friends to listen it carefully. So far as the completion of action is concerned, it is well within their competence if the notices are issued on or before 30th June for assessment year 2013-14, 2014-15. But the question comes whether those notices will be issued under the old law or under the new law. Because if we were to say that they have to be issued or they can be issued on or after 1st April under the new law, then obviously no notice under section 148 can be issued unless inquiry before issue of notice is complied with. So I found that the board while issuing notification on 31st March and thereafter 27th April, very intelligently or smartly has given one explanation. And that explanation says that these notices will be issued under the old provisions of section 148, 149 and 151. But whether this notification giving interpretation as to the provisions of law, which is not mandated by the Taxation and Relaxations of Provisions Act 2020, could be given at all? That is the question. Because if we read section 3 subsection 1 of this Taxation Relaxations of Amendment Provisions Act 2020, then the poverty issue notification was only for the purpose of completion of an action. Now, completion of action was the issue of notice. But then to say which provision of law would apply, that the law will tell. Board has not been given this power under section 3 subsection 1 of that Relaxation Act. And therefore, in my humble understanding, that explanation given in that notification is in excess of the statutory mandate given into the board by section 3 subsection 1 of the Taxation Amendment Relaxation Provisions Act 2020. And therefore, according to me, the notices issued for assessment year 13, 14 or 14, 15 or for that matter any assessment year on or after 1st April 2021 now will have to be issued. Only after undergoing the provisions section 148 capital A. But then legislature, having taken this position, now can change its positions in case it is found, based upon the interpretations made by the courts in times to come, that all these notices now issued were bad, then who knows that retrospective or retroactive amendments would not come, because this government is a resolute government. It ensures that the things which it has thought go unhindered, unobstructed, unimpeded. And therefore, even if this interpretation we are taking, the courts are tending to take, I'm not saying, but then Bombay High Court at least has given an interim stay. I mean, on these kind of arguments, many more writ petitions are in the pipeline, and you will find the high courts are flooded. But then the government can always come with some ordinance amending this kind of a position. So friends, now it is 6:40, 20 odd minutes we'll have to give for questions, if at all there are any. And my fellow co-panelists are also there. I have been told that they also have to speak, and therefore I'll give quietus to this deliberation at this stage. And I thank each one of you that despite disturbance at my end because of some technical error, because of the power outage, you have given a very patient ears to this deliberations. I thank each one of you from the core of my heart. Thank you. Over to Nikhil Jain.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed a very pleasure for all of us at Kota branch, as well as all those hearing, not only in Kota but other areas also, to hear the deliberation on the most relevant topic these days. Now I would like to request our panel experts to give their view on the topic. First, I would like to call CA Sanjay Khandelwal ji to express his views.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
After listening to the deliberation of learned speaker, nothing much is left to be commented upon. In fact, he is very well deliberated all the provisions, and he is thoroughly knowledgeable. I attended a few webinars where he was a speaker and gained a lot out of him. I think in the time to come, department is going to have vast pool of information which shall be coming through this annual information return, etc. And I think there will be many things which will be left out. So there will be perhaps plenty of such matters and reopening cases will be there. One good thing I have found about this new scheme is that we shall be able to know the reasons in advance, and we can submit our objections to such issues in advance. So maybe notice under section 148 may not be issued to us if we can explain it properly. So I think, in my opinion, the new provisions are more helpful and good for the assessees. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your expert comments. Now I request a second panel expert, C. Sanjeev Bajari, sir, to express his views on the topic. Sanjeev, sir, you may unmute first of all.
Thank you, Nikhil. In fact, everything has been discussed with regards to reassessment proceedings by the learned speaker and his practical discussions and on the approach which we should follow. I just want to add one or two things which are not relevant to reassessment but to other assessment proceedings, and I would like to have an opinion on one or two of such things. One point of discussion I would like to go with Mr. Gupta. In case of assessments, notice has to be served, whereas in the case of reassessment proceedings, notice has to be issued. I think Gupta ji will throw a little bit of light on this matter. And as far as the faceless assessment is concerned, another thing which I would like to share with my experience, faceless assessment एक तरह से CA का एग्जाम की तरह ही है, जहाँ पर आपको ये इंटरफेस, ह्यूमन इंटरफेस नहीं है, और you have to express yourself, you have to be very specific to the queries, and you have to be very expert in communication skills and writing skills as well. क्योंकि जब ह्यूमन इंटरफेस होता है तो आप असेसिंग ऑफिसर को समझा पाते हैं और उसकी फेस रीडिंग भी आप कर सकते हैं. यहाँ पर किसी तरह की फेस रीडिंग आप नहीं कर सकते, तो आपको बड़ा ही एक बहुत स्पेसिफिक और लॉ की पूरी जानकारी होनी चाहिए, जिसके बारे में आप जवाब दे रहे हैं वो बड़ा स्पेसिफिक आपको जवाब देना जरूरी होगा. Then the government wants that time schedule should be strictly adhered, क्योंकि उन्होंने 143(1)A में कुछ ऐसे अमेंडमेंट किए जिसमें कि उन्होंने ये कहा कि हम कोई डिडक्शंस जो चैप्टर 6A के हैं जो इनकम से संबंधित हैं वो हम अलाउ नहीं करेंगे, या सेक्शन 36(5)A के डिडक्शंस जैसे ESI और PF के हैं, they were also deductions would not be allowed and adjustments would be made under section 143(1)A. There were a lot of hue and cry when intimation was received that without having any किसी भी तरह की उसमें आपके पास में authority नहीं है तो भी आप उसमें adjustment कर रहे हैं. So now the government has made such given such authority to CPC to disallow such things. I think the time limits have been reduced, जो कि 3 साल कर दी है 6 साल से, वो काफी अच्छी है, जिससे कि अनसर्टेनिटी थोड़ी सी कम होगी और उसमें किसी भी तरह का आपको कंप्लीशन में भी जो टाइम दिए हैं, these are of course a welcome decision on the part of the government. I thank Gupta ji for his very useful and informative deliberations. That's all I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Rakesh sir, if you want to comment.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
संजीव सर ने दो बातें कही कि in the matter of reassessment, now section 149 uses expressions issued. Now, position of law in this regard has always been like this, and therefore it will be important for us to understand these two terminologies, service and issue. Now, jurisdiction to reopen an assessment. Kindly mind what I'm saying, and I'm going to say. Jurisdiction to reopen an assessment is assumed on the basis of the issuance of a notice, whereas jurisdiction to pass a reassessment order is assumed when that notice is served. So, like under the old provision, suppose if I give you an example, say for assessment year 2012-13, let us take. Now the notice could be issued on or before 31st March 2019. So even if this notice under section 149 has been served on the SSE, say on 4th April 19, then also jurisdiction has been correctly assumed, because that notice to reopen an assessment under section 148 has been issued on or before 31st March 2019. But jurisdiction to pass a reassessment order based upon this notice so issued now can be assumed once that notice is served. So if the notice under section 148 has been issued in time but then has not been served, then jurisdiction to pass reassessment order would be assumed from the date of service of that notice. And this distinction was very nicely brought out by Supreme Court in the case of R.K. Upadhyay in 166 ITR 163. So, I mean, that can be gone through. Now, regarding the time limit which has been reduced, now whether that reduction is an eyewash, because if you remember, like in case of section 153, in case of a searched person, suppose if I say, in case of a searched person, all 6 years assessment, including the year of search, say 7 years assessment, they used to be passed at once on or before 21 months before the end of the financial year is the last of the authorization was executed. Now what would happen? Assessing officers as usual would keep on reopening each year's assessment when it is going to be barred. So in case of a search taking place on or after 1st April 2021, the assessment in case of a searched person now can be dragged for how many years, that you can very well understand, because all 10 years assessment, 9 years or 8 years assessment will not be done at once, because the department also thinks that each year's assessment should be reopened so that the burden of all assessments getting barred, I mean, would not come on their head. So this has whether reduced the time limit or whether this has increased the time limit in this manner. Now that is a question on which we'll have to ponder over. Now there are a couple of questions in question answer box. So one is from, I mean, both are from Mr. Sumit Chittoda ji. When return is required under section 148. Now return is required whether under the old provision or under the new provision when notice under section 148 is served on you. So what else is the question? I have not been able to find out from you this question. The second question is, when SSE filed correct return after furnishing of information, what is consequence regarding penalty? So if SSE has filed correct return after furnishing of information, probably there is some gap in your question. So if SSE has filed correct return, then I believe that correct return now must have been assessed as such. So if it has been assessed as such, then there should not be any consequence regarding the penalty under section 270 capital A, or for that matter under section 270(11)(c). So from the questions which you have put, Sumit bhai, I have not been able to appreciate the questions. I mean, beyond this, what you have written. And you know, I am an interpreter of the direct tax laws by following the rule of literal construction. So the literal construction of our questions suggest, I mean, these questions this manner, and therefore I have chosen to reply them.
Sir, I have unmuted
Yes.
Sumit so that he can
Ah,
directly ask. That would be
Yes,
better. I
yes,
guess.
yes, Sumit ji, yes, Sumit ji. Yes, Sumit ji. Sumit ji, अपना प्रश्न
सुमित
आप
जी,
जरा और
आपको
स्पष्ट करें,
अनम्यूट कराया
म्यूट
है
करके
मैंने।
प्रश्न अपना स्पष्ट
I am
करें।
audible?
हाँ सुमित
Yes,
जी।
yes.
Sir, I am asking if SSC file correct rate after furnishing of information by AO. Then what is
Furnishing of information, which information you are talking? Assessing officer कौन सी information आपको furnish करेगा?
असेसिंग ऑफिसर था, उसके पास जो रिस्क असेसमेंट के बेसिस पे जो इन्फॉर्मेशन आई है वो अपने को फर्निश करेगा।
अच्छा, मैं आपको बताया, एक तरह से रीजन टू बिलीव समझ लो आप, वो आपको
हाँ,
फर्निश
हाँ,
कर
पहले आ
देता है
गया।
मटेरियल।
हाँ हाँ हाँ,
अच्छा,
वो
हाँ, ठीक है।
उसके बाद उसने करेक्ट रिटर्न भर दी सर।
करेक्ट
तो
से क्या मतलब
उसके
है? करेक्ट शब्द तो बड़ा ही
correct
अपने
मतलब
आप में बड़ा।
मीन ये है कि जैसे इंफॉर्मेशन जो भी उसको सप्लाई हुई थी उसके बेसिस पे उसको पता लगा कि हाँ
आपका
वाकई में कुछ स्कैम रखे लगे।
आपका अभिप्राय ये है कि सपोज कोई 5 करोड़ रुपए की इंफॉर्मेशन थी और आपने 5 करोड़ रुपए अपनी आयकर विवरणी में आय में दिखलाकर उसको रिटर्न भर दिए, मतलब है आपका?
148 के रेस्पॉन्स में जो रिटर्न भरी उसके अंदर
आप
मैंने करेक्टली डिस्क्लोज कर दी।
आप तैयार रहिए सेक्शन 270 ए की पेनल्टी के लिए, बिकॉज इस क्रेडिट को आपका कोई क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा, ठीक है ना? आपकी इस दरिया दिली, आपके इस उदार विशाल उदार महामना हृदय को कोई कानून में आपको कोई उसका पारितोष नहीं है उसका।
बस वही पूछ रहा था कि उस केस में
हाँ,
पेनल्टीज वगैरह का क्या होगा?
नहीं। देखिए, एक बड़ा आधारभूत सिद्धांत है कानून का, एडमिशन इज द बेस्ट एविडेंस अगेंस्ट वनसेल्फ। सो इफ ए पर्सन बिलीव्स अंडर लॉ कि दैट बाय बेयरिंग हिज चेस्ट, by bearing his chest or he will get any mercy, no, rather mercy is in the form that the department then will not have to prove, because you yourself have proved against yourself. ठीक है?
It's okay.
तो आपके दोनों प्रश्नों का उत्तर इसी में हो गया।
ठीक, थैंक यू।
ठीक है।
148 की पेनल्टी का तो मतलब वो मिलेगा।
निखिल जी,
हाँ,
निखिल जी, अगर और कोई क्वेरीज नहीं हो तो मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा राकेश सर से छोटी सी।
एक मिनट
सर अभी संजय जी का भी कोई क्वेरी है?
एक मिनट
हाँ बी विशाल सर।
What I am asking, there is a difference in the date of section 153A after it is 31st March 21, and in 153C it is 1st April 21. What is the reason? Is there any logic? Because both the sections were for the reassessment of such cases. 153C for the information and 153 for the directive evidences. Secondly, what I am asking that
माइजोर दोबारा बोलेंगे, मैं प्रश्न आपका समझ नहीं पाया, मैं प्लीज है, सुना नहीं मैंने।
the date given in 153A in a revised, it is 31st March 21.
सर let me see 153A में कहाँ पर दी हुई है डेट? मेरे सामने एक्ट रखा हुआ है सर।
सर जो अभी इन्होंने कहा ये अपने जो है ये अपने 2003 से लेके 31 मार्च
31 मार्च 21, हाँ देख लिया मैंने सर, देख लिया, ठीक है सर। और 153
सी इट इज 1st April 21.
153C में कहाँ लिखा है? ये है, nothing contained in this section apply in relation to such initiated under section or other execution on or after 1st day of April 2021. हाँ ठीक है सर, कोई there is no dichotomy, क्योंकि उन्होंने कहा है ऑन और बिफोर 31st डे ऑफ मार्च 2021 तक यदि कोई सर्च हो जाएगी तो वो 153A में असेसमेंट होगा। और नथिंग कंटेन्ड इन दिस सेक्शन शैल अप्लाई इन 153C में लिखा है कि कोई सर्च जो 1 अप्रैल है उसके बाद होगी तो वहां 153C अप्लाई नहीं होगा। तो दोनों का अभिप्राय सेम ही है सर।
राइट। वन मोर थिंग इज what will be the function of central circuit after this 31st March 21? Because there is no 153A is not there.
Yes.
Then the regular assessing officer will do assessment or it will go to central circuit.
नहीं, देखिए जो सर्च वाले केसेस हैं वो तो सेंट्रल सर्किल में ही रखेंगे, बिकॉज कोऑर्डिनेटेड इन्वेस्टिगेशंस और बहुत सारे लोगों को 127 में ज्यूरिसडिक्शन लाके कोऑर्डिनेटेड इन्वेस्टिगेशन के लिए करते हैं, तो सेंट्रल सर्किल तो रहेगा। वैसे ही सर माहेश्वरी साहब बहुत कुछ खत्म हो गया है, और कुछ खत्म मत करवाओ सर।
Right.
Sanjay Khandelwal ji also has a
हाँ.
question.
Sir, I just wanted to ask only one thing. Sir, since
Yes,
there
sir,
is
yes, sir.
no amount is mentioned for the escaped income up to 3 years, so
Yes,
can
sir.
they take any small amount? Suppose there was some interest from savings bank account,
And
which we could
there is
not,
interest saving account. Okay.
and say 1,000 rupee or 10,000 rupees, which was left to be reported in the ITR. So can they take that up to 3 years? Any small amount they can take?
सर वो तो आज भी आप देखेंगे 149 4 साल तक तो इवन 1 लाख की लिमिट भी नहीं है आप
नहीं,
तो
लेकिन
इसलिए
सर अब इसके बाद अब आगे से बहुत सारी इंफॉर्मेशन उनके पास आएंगी, जैसे फाइनेंशियल कि ये छूट गया, कुछ भी कई चीजें छूट गई।
सर वो तो फिर आप मतलब इस बारे में ना पुराने लॉ में कोई मतभेद है ना अब कोई मतभेद है, ठीक है ना। तो इसलिए उनके पास इंफॉर्मेशन तो पहले भी हो सकती थी कि ऐसे
पहले
के लिए भी हो सकती थी।
पहले कम होती थी सर, कोई बैंक इंटरेस्ट
एसेसिंग ऑफिसर के ऊपर होता था, एसेसिंग ऑफिसर इंक्वायरी कर सकता था, कर लेता था और निकाल लेता था।
नाउ देयर विल बी फ्लड ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन।
हाँ तो सर वो तो सर
आपको क्या लगता है सर कि वो कैंडिडेट मतलब इतने छोटे केसेस भी ले पाएंगे क्या?
तो सर जब उनके पास इंफॉर्मेशन ही होगी तो वो इस 10,000 के लिए थोड़ी का केस खोलेंगे, वो तो फिर जो इंफॉर्मेशन फ्लैग के बेसिस पे खोल देंगे। 10,000 को तो बाद में उसमें ले लेंगे रिटेल में ऐड करने के लिए, ठीक है ना।
ठीक
है। राम जी सरिया wants to ask one question. आत्माराम जी आपको अनम्यूट करा है।
वाह सरिया साहब, आज आप यहाँ पर भी हैं, हमारे दिल्ली से मित्र हैं हमारे। हाँ सरिया साहब बोले। सर अब अनम्यूट करें सरिया साहब।
सर आपको अनम्यूट कर दिया है शायद।
सर अनम्यूट करें सरिया साहब, आप वैसे पूछ लीजिएगा फिर जब नहीं अनम्यूट हो पा रहे हैं तो।
रमेश चंद्र गुप्ता जी also wants to ask something.
हाँ करिएगा
रमेश जी।
हाँ थैंक्स राकेश जी एंड योर।
हाँ रमेश भाई
एक्सीलेंट।
हाँ थैंक यू।
आपका इतना अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस होता है कि सब कोई मेरी बस्ती नहीं है बट फिर
अच्छा
अपन लोग नौकरी और प्रैक्टिस चलेगी तो थोड़े बहुत झगड़े चलते सजेशन।
हाँ जी
थैंक यू सर, डेफिनेटली एक्सीलेंट प्रेजेंटेशन।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू सर।
एक और
संजीव सर wants to ask.
हाँ सर
कई बार ऐसा होता है कि सर्वे होता है लेकिन उसमें कोई खास सफलता डिपार्टमेंट को नहीं मिलती है, ऐसे कई बार ऐसे केसेस होते हैं।
जी
तो इसमें जैसे कहा है कि 148 में उनके पास में इंफॉर्मेशन डीम्ड मानी जाएगी 3 साल के लिए, और 3 साल के लिए आपको रीओपन कर सकते हैं। तो ये एक ऐसी चीज है कि साहब सर्वे में कई बार कुछ नहीं मिलता तो भी क्या वो 3 साल के रीअसेसमेंट करेंगे?
तो ये सिचुएशन जो सर्च में भी तो ऐसी होती थी, यदि कुछ नहीं मिला तो भी 6 साल के केस खुलते थे। अब बेचारे चने के साथ घुन भी आ गया है। अब
लेकिन सर्वे छोटा रूप है ना, उसमें कोई खास नहीं होता तो कोई खास वो नहीं होता था। और पहले सर्वे में ये था कि अगर आपने कोई
अब यदि सर्वे हो गया तो उसको 3 साल के केसेस तो करवाने ही पड़ेंगे।
अच्छा, पहले ये भी था कि साहब सर्वे में अगर कोई आपकी बुक्स कोई किसी तरह से कोई वो नहीं की है, इंपाउंड नहीं की है, तो उसकी असेसमेंट प्रोसीडिंग्स नहीं होंगी अगर कोई उसमें नहीं मिला और टैक्स जमा करा दिया है तो।
जी
लेकिन अब उस तरह का किसी तरह का कोई उसको
नहीं, अब तो एक्ट में ही प्रोविजन आ गया ना। पहले तो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव था वो जो था, ठीक है। अब तो एक्ट में ही प्रोविजन आ गया है,
तो वो 3 साल के करने ही पड़ेंगे।
जी हाँ।
I would request our session chairman C. Badri Vishal ji for his remarks now.
Thanks to Rajesh ji, first of all, very elaborately he has delivered us about the new sections of reopening, coupled with search and related provisions. In fact, I am highly obliged that such an elaborate way no one can explain. He has given each and every aspect of the reassessment which you have to follow, and so far the 3 years is related with that. Without any information they can reopen. it requires, in my opinion, it requires some amendment, because if there is no information, what is the need of the reopening? Because after reopening, they can go for the other issues. So we should, on the institute level or the tax bar level, we should give representation on this issue, that unless there is information, there should not be any reopening. This is my opinion, and thanks to all our colleagues, Milind ji, Sanjeev ji, Sanjay Khandelwal, and Nikhil, yourself. आज बहुत अच्छी मीटिंग आपने कराई है, और इससे सेलेक्टेड सब्जेक्ट ले उस भी अपन चलें तो ज्यादा अच्छा रहता है, इंस्टेड ऑफ गोइंग टू ऑल एट ए टाइम. एंड
सर मेरा यहाँ क्लोजर से पहले मेरा एक रिक्वेस्ट है डॉक्टर राकेश जी से कि वो अपनी एक कविता सुना के हमें अनुग्रहित करें.
कविता भी सुना दें. और मिलिंद जी, आई वुड लाइक टू हैव ए कॉपी ऑफ बुक व्हाट ही हैज पब्लिश्ड ऑन द रीअसेसमेंट. हाउ कैन वी गेट?
सर वो टैक्समैन की है, टैक्समैन वालों से आप मंगवा लीजिएगा, आपका बुक सेलर होंगे वहां पे. ठीक है.
टाइटल क्या है सर उसका नाम?
लॉ रिलेटिंग टू सर्च एंड सीजर एंड असेसमेंट ऑफ सर्च केसेस एक है, और एक है टैक्सेशन ऑफ रियल एस्टेट डेवलपर्स एंड जॉइंट डेवलपमेंट अरेंजमेंट, जेडीएस के ऊपर है. टैक्स इम्प्लीकेशंस रियल एस्टेट की है. तो मिलिंद जी ने कविता के लिए कहा है. मैं आपको बतला दूं, मैं वृंदावन का मूल निवासी हूँ, उत्तर प्रदेश में, जो कृष्ण की जन्मस्थली है. सीए करने दिल्ली आया था, अब दिल्ली का हो गया. तो बचपन में कुछ चीजें पढ़ी थी, वो कहीं ना कहीं कोने में दिमाग में रही. तो अब पीछे जो माहौल था बड़ा नकारात्मक था, तो मैंने एक कविता लिखी, वो 5 अंकों में है. चलो उसका एक अंक मैं सुनाता हूँ. यत्र तत्र सर्वत्र हो, कि चारों तरफ जो नकारात्मक माहौल है और वो किस तरह से सकारात्मक बने. और उसके लिए मैंने अपने जितने भी तो नहीं कहूंगा, लेकिन जो मैंने बचपन में पढ़े थे कवि या लेखक जिनके बारे में मैंने पढ़ा, उनको लेके मैंने बनाई है. यत्र तत्र सर्वत्र हो, ऐसी भावना, यत्र तत्र सर्वत्र हो, ये इसका थीम है. कबीर जैसी मस्ती हो, कबीर जैसी मस्ती हो, सुर जैसी भक्ति हो, बिहारी सा श्रृंगार हो, बिहारी सा श्रृंगार हो, भूषण सांगार हो, रहीम के दोहाई हो, तुलसी सी चौपाई हो, रस खान रसधार हो, मीरा का कृष्ण पुकार हो, जायसी सूफी वाद हो, खुसरो का रहस्यवाद हो, तानसेन का गीत हो, हरिदास सा संगीत हो, कालिदास शाकुंतलम हो, जयदेव गीत गोविंदम हो, सुभद्रा सी शक्ति हो, पंत प्रेम प्रकृति हो, जय शंकर कामायनी हो, मुंशी की अमर कहानी हो, मैथिली सी ओज हो, मैथिली सी खोज हो, दिनकर सा ओज हो, अज्ञेय सा ज्ञेय हो, महादेवी मर्मज्ञ हो, नीरज का प्याला हो, नीरज का प्याला हो, पवार सी ज्वाला हो, बच्चन की मधुशाला हो, सूर्यकांत निराला हो, खयाम की रूबाई हो, खयाम की रूबाई हो, शिवानी सी चतुराई हो, बेचैन सी, हरिओम बेचैन, चले गए, गाजियाबाद से थे. बेचैन सी गमक हो, और हमारे फरीदाबाद के बहुत ही प्रतिष्ठित, मैं फरीदाबाद रहता हूँ, एक बहुत अच्छे कवि हैं, मैं उनसे काफी प्रभावित हूँ. बेचैन सी गमक हो, और दिनेश रघुवंशी नाम है उनका, रघुवंशी की खनक हो, बेचैन सी गमक हो, रघुवंशी की खनक हो, यत्र तत्र सर्वत्र हो, यत्र तत्र सर्वत्र हो. तो ये मैंने लिखा, ये पहला मेरा अंक है. तो 5 इस तरह से हैं। और मैं आज से अपना जो चैनल मैं शुरू कर रहा हूं, तो जितने भी अब कभी सब अब मुझे जितने निमंत्रण वेबिनार के मिलते हैं उतने ही मुझे कविता चैनल के मिलने लगे हैं। मैंने पीछे 8-10 दिन कोई वेबिनार एड्रेस नहीं की, मैं थोड़ा आराम करने के लिए मैंने 4 कवि सम्मेलन मैंने एड्रेस किए। और अब 5 तारीख को आज ही निमंत्रण मिला है गाजियाबाद में, गाजियाबाद ब्रांच सीए की 8 से 10 रात को 8 से 10 बजे तक। मैं भेजूंगा मिलिंद जी आपको लिंक तो भेजूंगा ही मैं।
हाँ, लिंक भेज दीजिए लिंक।
और वो सारे ही मैं अब यूट्यूब पे डाल रहा हूँ, जिससे कि
बहुत अच्छा लगा सर।
मुझे कविता लिखने के बाद जो मुझे और जो किताबें लिखने के बाद जो मुझे सुकून मिलता है वो कमाल का है। आजकल ब्लैक मनी लॉ पर लिख रहे हैं मैं और मेरे पार्टनर जो है डॉक्टर राज, मेरे पार्टनर मथुरा से हैं, जिनका बेटा सोमिल मेरे साथ काफी वेबिनार्स में आता है। तो ब्लैक मनी लॉ में तो एक एक सेक्शन में इतने इश्यूज निकल रहे हैं कि वो पूछिए नहीं कि वो क्या एक्ट बनने जा रहा है। हम तो सोच रहे थे छोटी सी किताब, मैं समझता हूँ 300-350 पेज की किताब बन जाएगी, इतने कंटेंशियस इश्यूज हम डील कर रहे हैं उसमें। हम क्या करते हैं, हम एक एक सेक्शन में एक एक वर्ड में क्या कंटेंशियस इश्यूज हो सकते हैं, क्योंकि कोई जुडिशियल प्रेसिडेंट तो है नहीं, फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल ऑफ लॉ के बेसिस पे इंटरप्रेट होना है। तो वो सेक्शन की फीचर्स के बाद क्या क्या कंटेंशियस इश्यूज हैं, और वो कंटेंशियस माइंड बॉगलिंग है। जैसे हमने जब अपना ये लॉ रिलेटिंग टू सर्च एंड सीजर की किताब, हमारा 7th एडिशन है ये, इसमें जो इस बार हमने रिवाइज किया चैप्टर असेसमेंट वाला, उसमें ये जब सेक्शंस पढ़े उसमें इतनी सारी चीजें निकली कि वो हमने सारी इनकॉर्पोरेट की, और अभी भी उसके बाद भी बहुत सारी चीजें निकलती जा रही हैं। तो ये तो कानून, लोग मुझसे कहते हैं मिलिंद जी कि राकेश जी कहाँ आप इनकम टैक्स पे बोलते हो, कहाँ आप ये हिंदी कविता सुनाते हो, कविता पढ़ते हो, कविता लिखते हो। तो पता नहीं, मतलब मुझे तो दोनों चीजों में कोई विरोधाभास नजर नहीं आता। मेरे लिए तो इनकम टैक्स एक्ट भी एक कविता है। मैं तो एक जो डूबता हूं उसमें, मैं तो एक कविता की तरह ही उसको मैं पाठन करता हूँ, पठन करता हूँ।
लग रहा था सर वो।
तो मुझे तो वही आनंद आता है।
सर आपकी कविता बहुत अच्छी है, हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों पे आपको बहुत अच्छा कमांड है।
मैं तो साहब खंडेलवाल साहब, मैं तो वृंदावन कोसी का रहने वाला हूँ, और ग्रेजुएशन तक मैं तो हिंदी में ठेठ हिंदी पढ़ा हूँ, 12वीं तक टाट पट्टी में बैठ के पढ़ा हूँ मैं तो। अब ये माँ सरस्वती का आशीर्वाद है, आपने बोल दिया तो मैं काफी अभिभूत हूँ आपके इस तरह के अभिव्यक्ति से।
बहुत अच्छा लगा।
थैंक यू मिलिंद जी।
निखिल जी।
यस सर, थैंक यू सो मच सर। आपके डेलिब्रेशन के साथ में आपके काव्य पाठ को भी सुनने का हम सभी को अवसर मिला, तो उसके लिए मैं पूरी ब्रांच की तरफ से आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ। मिलिंद सर का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ, जिन्होंने आपको यहाँ हम सबके सामने बुलाने के लिए आपसे बात करी, और यहाँ पर इतना बढ़िया प्रेजेंटेशन हुआ, डेलिब्रेशन हुआ इस नेशनल टैक्स कॉन्फ्रेंस में। इतने अच्छे टॉपिक पर हम लोग बात कर सके, चर्चा कर सके, और काफी नई चीजों को समझ सके। इंडीड ये आई वुड से दैट it would be beneficial not only for the seniors over here but also for the youngsters like us. The deliberation that you have given today will definitely help us going forward. Now I would like to thank
मेरा एक सजेशन है सर, मेरा एक सजेशन है, जैसा सर ने कहा कि फिक्शन इन इनकम टैक्स एक्ट, उस पर सर एक बहुत अच्छा वो वेबिनार करें, तो अपन उनको वी कैन कॉल हिम अगेन।
आप करिएगा।
बिल्कुल सर।
अब कोटा आने में जो 2 रात लगती थी वो नहीं लगेंगे।
कोरोना की पॉजिटिव देन है सब, ये कोरोना की पॉजिटिव देन है कि आपसे मिलने का मौका मिला।
तो डेफिनेटली कोरोना का ये बहुत पॉजिटिव इम्पैक्ट है, क्योंकि इसकी वजह से एटलीस्ट जो ऑनलाइन वेबिनार चालू हो सके, हम नेशन वाइड स्पीकर्स को सुन पा रहे हैं, उनसे चर्चा कर पा रहे हैं। अदरवाइज जो कोटा जैसी सिटी में ये बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो रहा था, क्योंकि आने जाने में काफी प्रॉब्लम रहती है, सभी को टाइम कंज्यूमिंग हो जाता है। लेकिन आई वुड नॉट से थैंक्स टू कोरोना, बट आई वुड से थैंक्स टू टेक्नोलॉजी that we can discuss the issues over here and the members get benefited by this. Thank you so much everyone. Thank you all the panel experts. Thank you session chairman B. Vishal ji. Thank you convener of the whole National Tax Conference, CA Milind Vijay sir. Thank you Siddharth ji. And I would like to thank all the members who were present here, along with on behalf of Managing Committee of Kota Branch. I would say thank you everyone. And looking forward to meet all of you tomorrow for a very non-conventional topic to be taken by Central Council member CA CDS Nanda ji. So आप सभी से कल मुलाकात होगी. Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice.